think it takes a special temperament to be an episodic director. You still have to have a point of view. You have a strong point of view. I'm very clear on what the scene's supposed to accomplish, what the narrative is supposed to accomplish. And I'm not like, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Meaning, like sometimes like cinematically, a showrunner may not know how to elevate the look, you know? So that's why a lot of people have a producing director and hoping that they would do that, you know? But I really do credit the episodic directors that also honestly allow me to execute my vision, and that they're really being a part of it and a big piece of it. Because at the end of the day, after they do the director's cut, you know, it's the producer's cut. And, you know, when you're in the writer's room for 20 weeks and then prior to that doing research and stuff like that, you're going to know the characters better than everybody. Even if you're conceding on a point, like to be a passionate truth seeker, like really passionately seeking the truth about this character and what they would do, as opposed to seeking to be right. Like I'm not seeking to be right. Like I'm seeking to just get to the truth of it. And I always feel like there's like this tendency that you can have as a director, which is that you want the crew to love you. You want the actors to love you. I don't think that, because I come in making a decision that I'm going to love the actors and I'm going to love the crew. And then we'll see where it goes, you know?
Right.
Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon is a podcast on directing for anybody that's, quite simply, ever watched anything. Visit PeteChatmon.com to get your official podcast merch. Hoodies, hats, jackets, mugs, and other swag. And learn more about your host.
All right. Welcome to episode 52 of Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon. We are going to be welcoming Mr. Reggie Rock Bythewood. He is the EP writer, director on Apple TV's Swagger, which I hope most of you have seen. Really great season, knocking it out the box. The way they shoot the basketball is amazing. The emotion that they get into with these young actors dealing with the realities of being Black and trying to carve their way through a sports world that can be unforgiving is really poignant and crafty and masterfully done. So that show is dope. Make sure you're watching it on Apple TV. But before we get in there, let's just talk about a few more of Mr. Reggie Rock Bythewood's credits. I'm going to go to the videotape from assistant producer Jada George's interview prep. He's educated at Marymount Manhattan College. He got his start on A Different World as a story editor. We'll get into that. But in the TV space, he's also known for New York Undercover, Players, 30 for 30, Gun Hill, Shots Fired, and of course, Swagger, which I've started this conversation with. In the film world, Reggie Rock Bythewood is known for Vampire's Kiss, where he was an actor, a church bystander. A man was getting the education in every part of the process before writing Get on the Bus. He served as a photographer on Love and Basketball, which was directed by his wife, Gina Prince Bythewood. Dancing in September, that's in 2000, director, producer, writer. Biker Boys, 2003, director, writer. What else do we have? Special thanks on The Old Guard and Beyond the Lights, which were directed by Gina Prince Bythewood, of course. And Notorious, 2009, he was also the writer of that film. He has won the Black Reel Award in 2002 for Best Screenplay and Best Director for Dancing in September, NAACP Image Award, 2015 Outstanding Director for Gun Hill, and Black Reel Awards 2015 for Outstanding Director and Writing. So super accomplished gentleman. So happy he took the time to sit down and rap with me. My man Matthew Cherry tapped on his shoulder and connected the dots. So thank you, Mr. Cherry. But before we dive in, I figured in this season 4, which is all directors, I'd maybe lead into this interview with the life of a director and what's been going on since we last hit you with episode 51 with Mr. Paris Barclay. So what's going on? Meetings are kicking in again. I just got off a meeting this morning with a production company about 2 potential shows, one at Amazon, one at Peacock. Whenever this strike opens back up, should I, land those jobs? Tomorrow, another meeting with the HBO-related project. And I've been tapping the keys, working on some writing with my writing partner, trying to finish a heist script that I hope can get me back into the feature space. So as you can tell, it's a lot of meetings for future work, working on your own passion projects. I started with features. I began in the film world. I won't say I've strayed, but the last 6 years have been hyper TV focused, and I've never lost my desire to be in the feature space. And also, quite frankly, features are helpful in getting into the pilot director space as well in TV, because you're designing a world and folks can understand that you have that muscle, which is one I have, but I haven't worked it in a while, and I'm looking forward to showing what I can do in that space. What else is going on? I need to get one of my latest episodes from the network so I can add it to my website. I think, we often debate the value of a website, or maybe actors, it's like, should I have a headshot or not? I'm not an actor, so I can't really speak to it, but I just kind of feel like, it's almost like if you don't have a headshot, it's a missed opportunity, because somebody's going to want that headshot one day. So, for me, for a director, it's about the reel and it's about the website. And for those interested, I urge you to check out PeteChatmon.com, PeteChatmon.com. And it's just one example of a director's website. Pretty straightforward. I've got a nice little video clip at the top from the flight attendant. Then I have a bio. The bio, of course, is like, home court advantage as far as I'm concerned. It's your opportunity to let people know about you in the way that you would want them to learn about you. So which projects you lean into first, how you describe yourself, what things you leave out, because one person's bio is different from the next person's bio. And I know that from this show, because there's what we put together on our end. And then as I interview folks, there are the things that they are more passionate about presenting first. And that's indicative of what they would want you to know if they could control the narrative. So your website is an opportunity to control the narrative. It's also an opportunity for the longer bio, which is what you might find, or which is what you do find on my website. After that, I have a featured episode, which is The Flight Attendant. I got a link to view. And then I have a grid of 12 projects for people viewing to check out. I've got my reel. I've got upcoming shows, Dead Boy Detectives. And then I've got a smorgasbord of things that I want to show you, the visitor. I've got The Flight Attendant, You, Minx, Love Life, Silicon Valley, Insecure, Mythic Quest, Unprisoned. And then I have my short film, Black Card, and I have my narrative podcast, Wednesday Morning. I just want people to be able to see the breadth of what I've been creating, and be sure to let them know that I do create my own things, which is why the short film is there and the podcast is there. Then I've got quotes from folks that I've worked with, photos from on set, and then contact links for my reps, and of course, social media. So that's what this director has going on as far as work and presentation. I'm updating that director's reel every year, or maybe every 6 months, depending upon the work. I'm trying to make sure it represents all the different types of things that I can do, from comedy to drama to action to suspense or whatever it might be. And if I get anything new from an episode that is not present on the reel, I'll go in, have the reel recut, and swap out something that might be a little redundant or not necessarily moving the chains forward, and I'll put in a sequence of whatever it is that I'm looking to add. So upcoming reel cuts, for those who are watching closely, will lean more on action and stunts. So those are things that I'm adding, and I know just the episodes that I'm going to be pulling them from. So that's this week's Life in a Director. Right now, we're going to get it popping and dive into episode 52 with my man, Mr. Reggie Rock Bythewood. Enjoy.
Roll sound.
Speed.
The interview. Take one.
All right. So what I love to do with folks who have careers that are across different disciplines, I love to start with a question and see how well you remember the journey. So I'm going to ask you about this guy. Let's see if you can tell me a little more about him. He was arrested for committing arson in 1982. He tried working for a drug ring that caused Bob Morgan's death, put into a rehabilitation program in 1983. And the last known mention of him was at a wedding between Roy Bingham and Henrietta Morgan. Do you know who I'm talking about?
That I do. Well, that's a blast from the past. You know, I was 15 years old. I got cast in a soap opera called Another World.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell you something. So on one level, first of all, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it. I was going to the high school of performing arts, and it was going to mean that I was going to have to leave this high school and find another school that would allow me to, do this show, because high school performing arts didn't allow people to work professionally, right? So, but then I got there, and Pete, I'm working with Morgan Freeman.
Wow.
I'm working with Joe Morton. And you mentioned this character, Henrietta Morgan, that was played by an actress named Michelle Shea. She played my mother.
Yeah.
Michelle Shea was also one of the people who just really taught me how to be a professional. She's been on Broadway and done, many things. And so you fast forward to now, Michelle Shea is the acting coach for my young cast, helping them learn how to become professional.
I love it. The full circle, circuitousness of this career and this industry is always rearing its head in interesting ways. So that's 1982. And you mentioned High School of the Performing Arts. Now, is that the renowned Fame school?
Yes.
So you grew up in New York.
That's right. I grew up in the Bronx.
All right. So what was that like, going from the Bronx to Fame, as it were?
Well, first of all, it was like a 90-minute train ride every day, but I was going to performing arts. And, at that time, performing arts had the number one attendance record in the city because we all wanted to be there. We all could not wait to get in there and just practice our craft and really felt alive. Also, in the Bronx was it at that time. Yeah. I mean, hip hop was just really coming of age. And so any given day, I might just be at home, might be jumping on a train to go to school, or I might be walking over to the park where everybody had their equipment out and there was a jam. So it was an amazing time, and amazing time to grow up in the Bronx at that time.
Was the family supportive? Because I know, I went to NYU in 95, and, it was, even then it was you're going to film school? What? There's a school for that? How did your family understand what you were getting into, and were they supportive of that?
Yeah, I was not raised to not go for your dream. And was really raised to prepare, go after it. The safety net, if at all, was education, but it was never seek a backup plan, go become a business major in case you don't make it as an artist. That was never, it was, get an education, but go after that dream. So it was very supportive. sort of like from 15 on, I was in a single parent household. And so I didn't have a lot of communication with my father for quite some time, from the age of 15 to like 30, But I will tell you, he taught me some things growing up, just at a very young age, that always had an impact, which is never say can't.
Right.
I could get punished if I said the word can't. Like, that's how serious it was. So the idea of not going after it was just never entered my mind, and I'm really fortunate that that's the way I was raised. So much so, Pete, I remember sitting in high school performing arts. One time there was a class, and this teacher, it was about, I don't know, maybe 20 something of us in this class. And the teacher said, out of everybody that's in this class, there's probably only going to be one or two of you still doing this 20 years from now. One or two of you still pursuing this. And I just remember thinking, well, I don't know who the other one is, because I know I'm one,
Right, right. You need that, though.
Yeah, and it was just organic. But I just really did feel a calling. It's just at that time, I thought it was about being an actor for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A bit tangential, because I want to get into that a little bit more, but like, what was the thing, if there was one thing, do you remember what kind of sparked your interest in storytelling and in this creative pursuit?
I just think initially in performing arts, when we do a play, felt like there were two choices. There was to do a play by a white author, or to do Raisin in the Sun. And now, first of all, Lorraine Hansberry is my favorite playwright. So no shade on her.
Right.
But you can't always play Walter Lee up in this bad boy, So it was like, I really then started to seek out on my own other Black playwrights. And somehow in seeking out other Black playwrights, I really, really became interested in the written word, like really started to feel the importance of that. Also, when I was on a soap opera, for a while, I'm this kid who's on a soap opera and going to school, and it was really crazy. But I also felt like there was some good writing, but I didn't really feel like they understood the character of like a young teenage Black man, And so I really started to just ask questions about why things were written the way they were. And I really feel like that's where it started to happen. The other thing too, though, like when I was like the playwrights that we're seeking out, I would come across, it wasn't a part of the school curriculum, like came across a Mary Baraka, Rod Milner, and just like revolutionary Black playwrights that had something to say. And so I just really became enveloped in this idea that an artist's job is to change the world. I was so idealistic in high school. I really was like, I'm going to create art to change the world. And by the way, the biggest challenge as an artist and in this journey is to maintain that level of idealism. You know?
And I also feel like, at that time, right? Like, because let's see, that's probably somewhere like Blaxploitation is probably fizzling out, right?
Yeah.
And then there's that gulf between Blaxploitation and arguably, 1986, right? She's Gotta Have It, where there wasn't much of a voice for Black life. So I wonder if that compelled some of the idealism, because there were things, it wasn't like our humanity wasn't being shown. It was like who we are isn't being shown. And we've got to bring you up to speed on what it is to be Black before we can just show you what it is to have a day in the normal life.
New York was just kind of hot back then in terms of like race relations. There was just a lot of things popping off in the city. Quite a few events with racial tension. And I don't know what made my father do this because I'm sure, like in the parenting handbook 101, you don't take your 12, 13-year-old kids, some of those blaxploitation movies that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But man, I mean, at like 11, 12, 13, seeing movies with Pam Grier. I'm seeing Fred Williamson. I saw Black Caesar. I don't know how my father pulled it off, but I got to the premiere of this movie called Through the Hard Way.
Yeah.
Fred Williamson, Jim Brown, and Jim Kelly. And those things had such an impact on me. Now, I'm not going to say that, it was Oscar caliber storytelling, but them brothers weren't playing in those movies. Yeah. They were very revolutionary. So I know, even though that's those blaxploitation era, I think those, the part of narratives that I was seeing at a young age that basically stood up against racism, that stood up against the power structure, even in these Fred Williamson joints,
right,
definitely had an impact on me.
Right. Now, how much of the pivot to writing was, was that more a function of like, oh, there's more opportunities here, or I can have more control in the image, because your next job after Another World was a different world, right? As a writer.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a gap there. I felt pretty good about, things that were happening for me as an actor, because I'm a kid and I'm on TV and I'm doing commercials, and, I was making, great money for me back then,
right.
And then because I was so tapped into agents on auditioning, I didn't really want to go. I didn't take advantage of some college opportunities outside of the city. I wanted to stay in the city. So I went to a school called Marymount Manhattan College that allowed me to, stay in New York. And I wrote my first play. So one of the things that happened is we had a Black History Month celebration. And there was a couple of sisters there that knew I wrote. And they really pushed me to write something for Black History Month. And so I wrote this monologue called The Harlem Cowboy. And it was just about this Black cowboy who wanted to go to South Africa, treat Nelson Mandela. So it was a bit of a comedy, but I had something to say. And it went over so well that I turned it into a play, and then I wrote another play. And the thing about it is, when I wrote a play, all the Black students came out to support what I did, and it became like a celebration. So that's really where I really got excited by it. Also at the same time, but I was still acting, and I acted in a movie called The Brother from Another Planet. And it starred Joe Morton. And so I got to, reunited with him again, but it was also directed by an indie filmmaker named John Shales. And John Shales is, I don't know, he's just in so many movies, and he just goes indie, really great writer, director. And so I have this role in this movie, Brother from Another Planet, which actually was a very good film. But John talked to me about writing, talked to me about directing, and I was really inspired after working on that. And then shortly after that, I got cast I'm graduated at this time. I get cast in another soap opera. And at the same time I get cast in the soap opera, I get offered a fellowship, the Disney Fellowship Writers Program. It's the first year of the program. So I get offered to either do this fellowship program that's going to pay $30,000 a year, versus the soap opera is probably going to pay like about $30,000 a month or something. But I went with the Disney Fellowship Program, and I just decided I'm going to be a writer.
So what was the path from the fellowship to your first writing job?
Yeah, so I moved out to LA, was in the fellowship program. And while I was in this program, I don't know how, but like some of my scripts started to get around. And they got around to a Black executive that worked at NBC, at the time. And by the way, another executive who worked at NBC at the time was a woman named Felicia Henderson, who's gone on to become a writer and great showrunner. And we didn't know each other at that time, but I know that she sort of championed my voice. It got over to the producers at A Different World, Susan Fales, and I was called in for an interview to do a freelance episode, and
oh, is that how it worked? It was like, come in, we'll talk to you, and then write one on spec, kind of?
Yeah, because back then it was expected that you would give like at least, so, you'd have your writing staff, but you would give a freelance episode to somebody who was not on staff, right? So I go in the interview for this and I was told to have a few ideas, but I was like, man, I need this. I got to pay these student loans. Let me go in. So I had something like 20 something ideas.
I love it.
And when I got to like maybe like my 13th idea, they were like, okay, we got it. And they told me, we're not going to give you, they made me wait. So I got a call. And on the call, they said they talked and decided they weren't going to give me the freelance episode. Instead, they're going to bring me on staff. And I was like, what the hell? So it was just like, wow, it was amazing. Really was very excited for this opportunity. But to be real, also, my money was so tight that I was like, man, I could pay the student loan. And that was my main goal, is like, stay on it, don't get fired. Stay on it long enough to pay off my student loans.
Right.
But that's how I got hired onto A Different World.
Survival is quite the motivator.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
So that was, how long were you on? How long were you writing on that show?
I came on for the last 2 seasons, I believe. And so was it 3? No, I think it was 2 seasons. And yeah. Gee, man, I'm trying to think if it was 2 or 3. But it was really great. There's a couple of things that was really great about that. Number one is my first writing experience for, sort of outside the plays I was writing. Then you go into this sort of environment, you're not really convinced if, like, am I really a writer, like in this sort of space? And also, I didn't necessarily know that I could pitch jokes, and so it was intimidating on a lot of levels, but I'm in the writer's room. Yvette Lee Bowser was one of the writers in the room. Susan Fales Hill, who was the showrunner. Another one of the writers was Orlando Jones.
Really?
Yeah. Orlando Jones was on the writing staff. And Gina Prince at that time was in the writer's room. And so we all just sort of like formed a bit of a family and really just found my way. And true to my nature, I always wanted to be the first one in the writer's room and I wanted to be the last one to leave. Right. I just felt like that was something, if nothing else, I could control that. But yeah, so that's how it all began for me.
Now, would you describe that time? Because, people talk about the kind of golden age of Black TV. Is that time in 93, 94, when like a lot of shows are starting to come out across the different networks?
I mean, you started to feel a shift, but just to be very clear, you started to feel a shift with Black comedies. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. So like when people talk about that, we don't often mention that there weren't Black dramas.
Right.
Not yet. Right. So it was basically, until the WB and Fox, Fox coming out with Martin, like that started to happen. I mean, well, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air hit while I was still on A Different World. And then after that, there started to be other shows popping up. And there were a lot of Black sitcoms that helped build these networks, like literally. When Fox first started, it wasn't programming for 7 days a week. Right. It was like they had a lot of blackout days, no pun intended. And Living Color was like their big hit, and Girlfriends and Martin. I mean, not Girlfriends, excuse me, Living Single. And so it really, and then WB, UPN, all these sort of networks really started doing all this Black programming. Then when they got the programming, a lot of the Black shows started to go away.
Bait and switch.
Yeah. But that also opened the door. One of the early shows that Fox did was New York Undercover. And that was great for me. And I really wanted to move in that space because I always just felt more of a drama guy. And, also really, back then it was very hard. It was very hard for Black writers. I don't know if I should act like it's past tense, but I will for a second. It was very hard for Black writers to get hired on predominantly white dramas. And all the dramas, by the way, particularly back then, were predominantly white. There was no such thing as a Black drama, And so if a Black drama, if a Black dramatic pilot hit and the ratings went through the roof, that thing would die. And then the conversation would permeate.
Right.
Black dramas don't work. And so it was like you could never sort of turn that corner. And so New York Undercover was really great because it was, had music, had style. I mean, the leads were, a Black cop and a Puerto Rican cop.
Right. Yeah, that was my show. And that was groundbreaking at the time. Tuned in every week. So around that time, well, actually, let's live in that for a little bit. Like today, there is a challenge still of going from comedy to drama, and vice versa. What could you identify as like being helpful in making you in helping you make that pivot?
I mean, I think that. Well, before that, I worked for New York Undercover. I worked on a short-lived show that was really bad. and it was, I guess it was a comedy. I don't know, man. It was supposed to be a comedy, but it was single camera. So it also was like this gray area of, is it a drama? Is it a comedy? So I was able to have that under my belt, but also I presented my plays. I submitted my plays as part of, the reason to consider me for this. I was from New York. I was wearing a Yankee cap.
Right.
I was like that dude. I had a really great interview at the time with Dick Wolf. Andre Harrell was a producer on that show as well. And Andre knew me from just sort of New York circles and his brother from the Bronx, on a come up. So there was like great synergy for me. And I don't believe, it's a very interesting thing for me to be on the other side of it, to be interviewing people, because I've interviewed people that you can't tell if they really want the gig or not. And I'm not saying you got to like be desperate and begging, but you got to bring some passion. So I will just say to you, to really answer your question, I was just passionate about it too. I mean, I was very clear on not just the what, but the why. Like why I should be in this writer's room. And I believed it. And, ultimately they believed it. And that's how I got on.
That's such a huge thing. And I have this for a later question, but I'll just throw it to you now because, for a show like Swagger, obviously you're involved in who's directing, right? Who's writing. Like, what is it? And obviously you've just touched on it. You're looking for the passion. You're looking for someone who's direct about it. But like, let's maybe flip it. What are some of the things that happen in those meetings where you can kind of, you're almost immediately kind of ruling somebody out? Because I think for the directors who listen, that might be a good thing to hear, right? Because sometimes, you may not be communicating your passion, or you may have a particular temperament that might need a little bit of a knob turned on it while you're in the room, because just like auditions for actors, not every actor's great at auditions, not every director's great at that meeting to get the episode. So having been on the other side of that and having done it so well, and the people that you've hired, like, what would you suggest people avoid?
I think you can still be an introvert and express passion. So I don't think you have to like bounce off the walls and you know, tell a bunch of jokes if that's not organic to who you are. But second season was second season is a very clear thing, right? Because I have first season already up on the platform. It's already up there. It's right there. So you come into a meeting, you haven't seen the show. It's like, all right, man, this 30-minute, 45, 1 hour window we have is just quickly become 15 minutes. Because like, you're not even going to prepare. Like you're not even going to watch it. So there's that. Then when you're meeting various people, then it really becomes like who. So first of all, there's just passion on, if you're interviewing for the gig, why not watch all 10? Now, maybe you got the call 2 days ago, you haven't watched it. So Mac, just watch 1 or 2 or 3, okay, cool. But just being prepared, like don't just show up, just prepare. And it's also fun to ask questions, but is there any alignment you have cinematically or performance-wise or story-wise? Like, what are you connecting to? Because if it's just like, hey, I don't need another credit, then it's, then I'm not inspired to want to make it work. So I'll tell you, so one of the directors I hired, her name is Katina Medina Mora. And
she did the finale, no?
Yeah, she did 7 and 8. She did the last 2.
Right.
Now, Katina's work is good. And like she did sitcom, she did a couple, but like tonally, it was hard to sort of envision how she might be able to do swagger. Right. And then she showed me in the film that she had done, a while back, and it was really, really good. Right. And in our interview, she was just so passionate, so connected. And I believe that it wasn't an act. Like you could just tell how dialed in she was.
Right.
And I went back to look at her independent film, like just hoping that it was good because I just needed an excuse to pull the trigger. And I needed something else because totally I didn't know. And she hadn't done that type of action before. She hadn't done basketball. She didn't basketball. She didn't even know, she didn't really fully understand the game of basketball. But she understood character, she understood performance, and she understood how to connect with the material, and like everything that she said in the meeting just really showed a lot of passion. So that's why I hired her. I would say like Matthew Cherry, he's not bouncing off the walls and he's kind of just chill and he's kicking it, but just really made it clear that he was passionate about it. And the conversation was specific. Like specificity in the conversation was key. So it's just very hard, man, to hire people when you just feel like they could take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Because what we do is already so hard. It's so hard when it's clicking.
Right.
That number one, I don't want to work with people who are assholes, and number two, I don't want to work with people that aren't passionate because then I just feel like you're just phoning it in. And, ultimately, I want you to come in and really look to elevate the material. So,
in these particular situations, are you having to advocate to the studio and network, or are you kind of able to be the last line of defense on these selections?
Yeah, I didn't get any pushback, actually, which is great. I think sometimes if somebody hasn't done TV before, like I think when Nigella Mumin, who also directed, 206, like one of our bigger ones this season, I don't think Nigella had done TV before she did Swagger or She's a One. I'm not, and if she hadn't done a lot,
Yeah, maybe I think she might have done Queen Sugar maybe at that time.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Queen Sugar came first. I don't think, I want to say I think we were first because she was also in my writer's room, by the way.
Gotcha.
But the point is she hadn't really done something that would demonstrate she could do Swagger. And so, sometimes you have to advocate when there's like not a lot of TV experience. I will tell you years ago, Gina and I had a show called Shots Fired. And sometimes like executives just aren't as aware as they should be. And we wanted Casey Lemons to do one. And she hadn't had TV experience, but it was Casey Lemons.
Right.
And it became a bit of a battle. And, we were able to fortunately win that battle, and she went on and did a really great job. So sometimes you could run up against that. Fortunately for me, I didn't have those challenges, and really just got like great, passionate people. And probably the bigger challenge is that you sometimes come across really like a lot of good choices, and having to figure out who's going to get it versus who's not, I find pretty difficult.
Right. And then trying to put them on the right episode or right block of episodes that suit their skills and passions. And it's a tough job. You're picking like, 4 babysitters at one time, for the most crucial years of your child's life.
Right. So you could imagine like how important it is to be passionate.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Paris Barclay, director, writer, producer, and you're listening to Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon.
Transitions, A Director's Journey and Motivational Handbook is Pete Chatmon's book from Michael Weezy Productions. The reviews are in. Greg Berlanti says, "There's a reason why everyone who works with Pete falls in love with his work. The lessons he imparts here are invaluable. Do yourself a favor and read it cover to cover." From Sarah Gamble, Pete's sharing gold nuggets that will spare you a ton of wasted time and help you channel your drive, talent, and ambition in the most productive way. And from Jesse Williams, this business has everything to do with preparation and expectations. Transitions grounds lessons in reality while empowering our artistry to run free. Not an easy balance to execute. Transitions, A Director's Journey and Motivational Handbook is available on Amazon and anywhere else you get your books. Don't forget about your mom and pop shops, people.
I'd love to go from getting from the writer's room to the director's chair. What was that journey like for you?
Well, it's interesting because I directed my plays.
Mm-hmm.
And I really loved working with actors. And I didn't go to film school, I went to theater school. So I was a theater major. So I didn't really have a handle on a lot of the technical aspects. But I mean, New York Undercover on some level was film school. And it was great to learn how to produce. But, it's again, one of the things that we talk about during the strike is writers being able to be on set. I was on set every time I wrote something, and sometimes when I didn't write something, they'd send me to New York and I would be on set. So just like you just kind of just doing it as a producer, doing it as a writer, agreeing with choices that are made directorially, not agreeing. And then I spent so much time in the editing room. On some level, New York Undercover was another film school for me. Mm-hmm. And I was encouraged quite a bit to direct. We would always have like these montages, and that's how this show would open up.
Yeah.
And I was always encouraged to direct one of the montages, but honestly, I was writing so much, I just felt like it was too much pressure to try to, put all of it on. And but I'd always regretted not directing some of that. And then I just got to a point. Maybe it was sometime after doing Get on the Bus, that it was like it's really great as a writer to hear your words performed, and we don't write to just have it read. We have it right. We write to have it produced. So really blessed. But I also just started feeling like, man, like even if I liked the choices another director made, it just started to feel like it's somebody else's vision, but it needs to be my vision. I need to protect my vision.
Right.
And so then I wrote a screenplay called Dancing in September, and raised some money. Most of the money I raised was among other Black TV writers and producers and managed to raise $1 million and shot my first film and learned a lot. But that's what got me in that chair and really, and I continue to go back and forth between writing, directing, and just writing. But protecting my vision was really the impetus to want to direct.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you remember how many investors you had on dancing?
It's a lot.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say maybe somewhere in the area of 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you feel, I wonder if you feel, because I raised about half of that for a feature. I had 35. I had 35 investors, but I was going to ask you if looking back, do you feel it was like an early version of crowdfunding? Or did you know everybody did you have a relationship with everybody?
No, it was a bit of both, and I used Get on a Bus as a template because Get on a Bus actually was an independent film as well. We raised money among 16 Black men.
Right.
And so there was this sort of formula in place of, you raise money, first money in, they recoup their investment. And so I was able to present that to some of them might have been some investors from Get on a Bus. And then, I hit up some people I knew. I think actually, if I remember correctly, I didn't raise the full 1 million at first. I raised, maybe it was like 7 or whatever I thought was enough.
Some in the can money.
then I got imposed, and I was like, I need some more money. I got to do some more things.
Right.
But at least I was able to show people what I had.
Always easier to get those finishing funds when you're come take a look at this cut.
Right. And that's what happened, and so I was able to finish it and put it out to some festivals and stuff. And such a blessing to have it acquired. And, I think we spent $1 million and we got back like 2.25. So I was like, man, this is not bad, but it's also hard doing an indie joint and getting distribution. It wasn't like I had various viable options. It was like one option that maybe I'd be able to recoup, and another one where HBO was like, hey, we'll buy it.
Right.
Good night. There you go.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the journey is interesting. And what you said at the beginning of like not being able to say, I can't, is reflected in these pivots in discipline and craft that you've employed to get to where you want to go. In the years after that, was there a new distinction between like, okay, this one I'm comfortable writing, being the writer, I don't really want to direct it. This thing I have to direct. How did those distinctions happen on the projects that came after? Because there are some that you wrote and then there are some that you directed. And I wonder.
Yeah, that's really an interesting question that you asked, because I'm just putting this together as you asked this question. Like that has really helped me in being a showrunner who directs some of it, but doesn't direct all of it. Well, first of all, I would get hired to write some screenplays. And a lot of the things I was hired to write, there was a director attached. And sometimes I was excited to work with the director. They were kind of down the road for a bit on Notorious. They asked me to come in and work on a script, and George Tillman was the director. And I was like, yeah, that'd be cool to rock with George. So sometimes it's like that. But I didn't want to just direct. I just wanted to direct some specific projects, And so then I wrote some stuff that is just now, prior to the strike, getting a level of attention that I had always wanted to get 15 years ago. So yeah, I was not really looking to direct, but just direct my own material that I was creating. And when we did Shots Fired, Gina did the pilot and I did the finale. Mm-hmm. And that was good. And coming off to Swagger, I was able to use some of the skills that you're asking me about, which is sometimes as a writer, I'm not the director, but it's important for the director to have a vision. But it's also important for that vision to align with my vision. And on a film, the director obviously is king or queen, totally different on a TV show, so, but I want the directors to bring what they bring, to have their own, views and lean to their strengths. And so I've actually found myself enjoying that collaboration. Like I've worked with directors where I've enjoyed the collaboration. I feel like I've learned, and at times feel like they've learned from me. And so now, like even when we did Shots Fired, Malcolm Lee came to direct a very dramatic one that I wrote. And it was fun to have Malcolm do something so dramatic. But I had a really good time, working with him. So I really became fond of, and by the way, going back to Shots Fired, Jonathan Demme was one of our directors. And that's a whole other, by the way, I'll just say in terms of passion, that dude was in his 70s when he came and he had more passion in his pinky than the rest of us all had combined. Really caring about having something to say, really caring about craft, really caring about what you're putting out into the world, So I had some collaborations that were very inspiring. So, now running a show, it's challenging because I could sort of see, I just have a strong opinion of what it is.
Right.
But I also want a director to have, I want them to surprise me. And it's just a really great evolution in terms of me being able to do both, writer out front as a director, writer sitting next to the director. But it does help that ultimately everyone is looking to achieve my vision.
Right.
Definitely makes it more gratifying.
Right. Yeah. It's such a, as a guy who I've been a PD on a show, I've hopped around on a lot of different shows, and it's always first day of school, when you show up and you're trying to figure out, well, what are they looking for here, and where can I add value, that is in the sandbox of what this, game is. And that's the big, rinse repeat challenge of TV, finding a way also to not turn off your passion and enthusiasm when perhaps your idea, I might have an idea and you might be I love that, but it's not right for this moment. I've seen, as a PD, I've seen directors take that as you stomped on their fire, and then I've seen them understand that oh, okay, I was maybe interpreting this moment in a way that's not going to flesh out with what the whole character arc or season is doing. And it's not personal. It's just not what works.
It really does take a very special temperament to be that person. I think it takes a special temperament to be an episodic director. But I've seen the ones that I feel have worked well are the ones that you still have to have a point of view. You have a strong point of view.
Yeah.
But also kind of be open, and I'd like to think it's a good situation if you're working with me, because I'm very clear on what the scene's supposed to accomplish, what the narrative's supposed to accomplish. And I'm not I don't know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Meaning,
right.
sometimes cinematically, sometimes a showrunner may not know how to elevate the look, So that's why a lot of people have a producing director and hoping that they would do that, But I really do credit the episodic directors that also honestly allow me to execute my vision, and that they're really being a part of it and a big piece of it. Because at the end of the day, after they do the director's cut, it's the producer's cut. And, when you're in the writer's room for 20 weeks and then prior to that doing research, and like you're going to know the characters better than everybody. And unless you're a director that's been in the writer's room with everyone. Some producing directors do that, but that's very rare to get that budgeted. So yeah, I don't know, man. I know I've said it a couple of times, but I just go back to this. Even if you're conceding on a point, like to be a passionate truth seeker, like really passionately seeking the truth about this character and what they would do, as opposed to seeking to be right. Like, I'm not seeking to be right. Like, I'm seeking to just get to the truth of it. And I always feel like there's like this tendency that you can have as a director, which is that you want the crew to love you. You want the actors to love you. I don't think that, because I come in making a decision that I'm going to love the actors and I'm going to love the crew. And then we see where it goes.
Right. Perspective shift.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So let's talk about the show. I know, everybody should have seen the entirety of season 1 and season 2, which is great. And, you mentioned like not needing necessarily a PD on this show because you've got specific ideas on how to elevate the look, which...
Can I say that? Well, yeah. I mean, you know what it is? It's like, well, season 1, I'm a producing director. Season 2, I felt... Well, let me just I just want to clarify this for you. So season 1, I'm the producing director, but that's when the pandemic first hit and none of us really had much awareness of COVID.
Right.
And I didn't feel that it was right for people potentially putting their life on the line and I'd be back chilling in my spot in LA. I was like, if they're going to be out there, I got to be out there. I'm going to be on set with them. That's just how I felt as a showrunner, as a leader. So what I found is like I was on set a lot, but I wasn't given the opportunity to have a lot of writers on set. So
did you have any, or did you just have?
I was able to get like one or two for like a little bit of time. And I fought to get them on set, but it was a fight. But I got them extended for a little while, but it was just like so much of it was all on me. So when season 2 came about, I feel like on my style of show running, I'm going to be there. I think that felt right to me. But what didn't feel right is that I didn't have writers being able to come on set. So I felt I will be the showrunner / producing director because I want you to take that money so that writers can be on set. And that's kind of like how I was doing. And I feel very passionate about writers being on set. I feel like that. I think it's just crucial. And it's just good. It's good for actors. It's good for everyone. It's good for the director, Yeah. So that's really what it came about is I felt, it wasn't so much like, I don't need a producing director. I just felt like I need my writers on this bad boy. And, it's obviously one of the things people are striking about, but that was my way of approaching it is, I feel like I could communicate directly to directors.
Right.
I'd have...
Kind of piggybacking on what you're saying and kind of talking about the strike a little bit, the reason you can do that is because you've come up through all those ranks that the writers you're trying to preserve have not, right? So
exactly.
You've seen all the things that like you're able to, I don't know if it was a cost savings or not to the network, but arguably you're able to present this cost saving because you've got the experience. And for them to, eliminate this idea of writers on set and think that in 5, 10, 15 years, the shows are going to be as good as they can be, it's an equation that doesn't add up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I started my career that way, and a different world was different because it was shot in LA and it was, 3 camera and shot in front of a live audience. But, I was on set. Like it just felt organic. So I would have had an executive producer, writer who was there every time I couldn't be there. And it was just felt great. And then I was able throughout the season, was able to get at various times 3 other writers to be on
That's
set.
great. That's
Yeah.
great.
I would have liked more, but it was definitely crucial.
So what's like, in talking about the show, I figured I'd ask you, like, what's something about the show that you would love to share that perhaps you haven't shared? You know what I mean? Like, it could be a creative thing, it could be a technical thing, but I just feel like, you know, I remember when in my documentary days, I would always ask, you know, people, the last question would be, is there anything I haven't asked you that you want to share? And I swear to you, 90% of the interview would come from that, because they go through their mind and really try and like make sure they're touching on what they feel is most important. So I don't know if it does that, but I'd love to hear what that might be for you in relation to the show.
Mm-hmm. I would say that part of it is how I've started to look at life in the last 3-4 years that align with me doing this show, like all coming at the same time, right? So, you know, all right, so let me just set the stage for you. We're in season 1. You know exactly where the show is going. Pandemic hits. What the hell?
Right.
How can we get back on? How fast can we get back together so I can continue the story as it is? And then it's like, dude, you've been talking a lot about surrender and what that means. And this is a perfect opportunity, like, to surrender. And like, do I have the faith and belief that God, universe, ancestors, whoever got my back, that if I do, why would I be punished with this, right? Like, so then you're like, well, wait, you're not. Like, this is an opportunity. So there's a pandemic. So surrender to it. You say you want to do a show that's not just about sports, but also holds a mirror up to society. Hold a mirror up to society. And by embracing the pandemic, by embracing all the sort of things that happened in 2020, from Ahmaud to Breonna to George Floyd, like, by embracing that, like, I put it in the storytelling and it elevated the show, right? So that was like the first sort of example of surrender. I can give you a few others, but I'll just give you this one in particular. So one of the more powerful hours of the show is in season 2, 205. And they play a basketball game at a detention center. And then there's like a lot of, and you know, you go after this, you really understand that you have a cause bigger than yourself. You really understand that this can be really powerful and meaningful. And so why would God be against you? So you're going out there and, hey, Reg, we got some bad news. It's going to rain. Okay, cool. All right, director, stay level-headed. What can we do about the schedule? Move things. We can't move anything around because this is the only day that we have this location. So if we go away, you're never going to come back to this prison location, which was hours away from the city. Okay. And then I'm out of ways of resisting it. So what do you do if you believe the universe has your back? What do you do if you believe that your job is to surrender? What do you do with that? So I got it in like this overwhelming level of confidence hit me because I understood that I'm supposed to surrender to this. Just write the rain into the script.
Right.
And we made it a story point. It wasn't like it just rained. Like it became the rain became a major story point in the script. And if it had not happened, it still would have been good. But it was elevated.
Right.
And so I really started to really just creatively understand that I don't always have to like fight against the tide, to like use the tide with me and surrender into that. And there's just several examples like that I can tell you that has made the storytelling better. And I'd say this approach is relatively new to me.
Yeah.
3-4 years, and it's like, and I'm still learning it. But that's been really great and exciting. And to understand, I don't need the net. I'm giving it a tightrope. It's good, and we can do this. So that idea of surrender as a filmmaker, sometimes it's like we can sort of take that outside of, I'm just surrendering as like a human being or as a dad or as a husband or what. But as a filmmaker, it's been really amazing to do that, particularly when I've seen it elevate the material.
And it feels so contrary to the idea of being a filmmaker, right? You're supposed to, push the mountain up, push the rock up the mountain,
right?
Rain or shine, it's gonna be shine, and just make it work. And that's an interesting thing to embrace, knowing that you've got the skill set and the toolkit to make it work to your advantage.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny too, because, that day we called all the department heads together, and I was so committed to this idea, and I knew it was going to be great because I saw it, and I just told everybody this is what we're going to do, and everybody was energized, man. And then like the rain happened, and we had this kid running around in the rain, celebrating the rain, and we just hustled so hard to get it. And by the end of the day, it was just exhilarating. It was one of our best days of production. Right. Because we surrendered and believed in this thing.
This is a question that I'm very curious about. How much of the performances are, if any, improv? Because in watching season 2, and in particular, like in the finale with the speeches, I was like, man, I feel like I'm watching a documentary. You know what I mean? Like, and I just was wondering as a filmmaker myself, I was like, man, are they just doing this? You know what I mean? Like, are they just doing what's coming to them because they've occupied these characters with such depth that they're just doing what the natural response would be?
Yeah, no, it was scripted. Maybe some of the call outs and ad libs when another kid would walk up to the podium. There was, some ad-libbing there, but the actual speeches themselves were scripted. We very specifically looked to shoot the show documentary style, if you will. Most of it is handheld. And the idea is to make you feel like you're there with them, that you're not a spectator, but you're part of the action. The other thing that was just really amazing about these speeches, if you go from, just another quick surrender, by the way, is that it took a minute to get the pickup from season 1 to season 2. So during that time, what did these kids decide to do? They decided to keep it damn growing, So that's why I was like, I don't want to come back and try to pretend that they're 10th graders. They're legitimately 18 years old. Boom, senior year.
Right. I
just surrendered to that. I felt it made it better. But the thing that was really amazing is a lot of times when young men get older, they become more guarded. For whatever reason, these young men got older and they had more vulnerability that they could express and bring to their performance. And I think that's one of the reasons why it was so satisfying.
Interesting. That's really interesting. And I wonder, to your earlier comment, I wonder how much the pandemic influenced that growth of vulnerability. Because, I was thinking about this the other day, You asked me when something happened, and now I can't tell you because it could have been last year or it could have been 2019, and they're both in like the same month to me. But I'm 46, right? So like to be 15 and going through that separation, that isolation, I wonder if it made the yearning for connection even stronger. I don't know.
I think so, because everyone had been separated, but also just even in particular during the finale, we shot that scene. If it wasn't the last day of production, it was like one of the last days of production. And so I think people are already sort of feeling that they were about to be separated again. So they were able to call that up. I mean, just also the other thing is just really important is just really, like what type of environment you want to create, particularly with young people. And as I said, like what we do is just too hard to deal with assholes, man. So it's like you really want to create a safe space, but also creating safe space brings out the best.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And it's evident. It's funny too. I'm from South Orange. I grew up there K through 12, man. So I knew, Isaiah's aunt, she was 2 years ahead of me, Lauren Hill in high school. And then his dad was a year ahead of my sister, Mulaney. So it's just crazy, like watching this whole thing happen. It's super dope, man. Well, I like to call this the rounding third part of the conversation. I'd love to ask folks, like, from your estimation, from your journey, what are 3 character traits that you find are helpful or required to succeed in this industry?
Okay. I'll just preface my answer with this, that I don't know if this is going to work for everybody. It works for me, and it's crucial. Number 1, have a cause bigger than yourself. We say it a lot in Swagger, but it is really kind of understanding the why, what you're doing. Like not just the what, but the why. Mm-hmm. And like tapping into that. And so that when you go into a room, it's not just you lobbying for this project, but it's you standing on the shoulders of ancestors or family or whatever, however you perceive it, and understanding that you have a cause and just bringing that into the room with you. So therefore, introvert or extrovert, bringing that with you already gives you your passion.
Right.
So, I could simply say passion, but I want to give you a little bit more detail, and I would extend it to say cause bigger than self. Number 2, preparation, just really being as prepared as possible. With son who plays baseball, is a baseball player at UCLA. And, right now he's training in his off season because you got to prepare because you never know what's coming at you. So like the more prepared you are, the more apt you are to say, hey, let's use the rain. Or let's, because your skill set is going to be tighter. And I think also communication, like having the ability to communicate. So it's not just enough to have the cause bigger than yourself or your passion. It's not just enough to have preparation. It's now, how do you have the ability to communicate your vision? And that's just another thing. I don't know, everybody communicates in their own way, but it's a very key component to getting a job. It's a key component to getting performance. It's something that really, needs to continue to be honed and mastered, which is your ability to communicate.
I love it, man. So a cause bigger than yourself, preparation, and communication.
Yeah.
I dig it. Is there anything you want to add that I haven't maybe touched on? We want another emerging artist to be able to chew on as they embark upon their path or continue on their journey?
I think just the other is just have fun, man. Like it's great. And, it can be stressful. Try to surround yourself with the right people. I'm fortunate enough to have been surrounded with some people that just have my back, make me laugh. And and to just, man, just like enjoy this journey, you know, go after it, but enjoy it.
I appreciate you. Well, I got to thank Matthew Cherry for linking us up.
Yeah.
And as I said, brother, like you're an aspiration and inspiration in what you've been doing, and you know, navigating an industry full of potholes and pitfalls with great success, and always having something to say and executing it. So, you know, I appreciate you taking a little time out of your day to join us here, man.
No, thank you, man. I appreciate it. And what do you have to say for the folks, man? Because maybe I could take something with me as well.
Oh, man. I mean, gosh, I always wonder because, you know, 50 plus episodes, I hope I'm not repeating myself for those who have listened to that many. But, you know, look, I mean, you have to always be learning. You know, one of the main reasons that, you know, this podcast I started it in June of 2020, during the quarantine, because I was like, man, I'm just at home and I miss the community, but also there's folks that I don't really talk to, you know, like I joke, I got friends that I've had on the podcast and I was like, yo, I never knew that about you. You know what I mean? Like you just like, sometimes you just don't really go there. Right. And so, you know, just to always be learning and in the process of the learning, finding your voice. And then the sooner you get to your voice, rinse, repeat, and just keep telling stories from that unique perspective, and something will catch. But during the time that you're waiting for it to catch, I think you'll be happy because you'll be you will be saying what drives you most. So, you know, I try and take my own advice with this strike. I've been working on a feature, you know, that has been languishing. And it's looking forward to fair deals for all and getting back to, like your last point, to what is really fun. I mean, it takes a lot of time out your day, a lot of time out of your life, away from family, but it's fun. And keeping that North Star of passion and having something to say and having fun with it. Yeah. Gotta always be learning. Yeah. There it is. Yeah. As we would say in the Bronx, knowledge reigns supreme. Over nearly everyone. There you go. I don't know who the other folks aren't, who the nearly are, but somebody's not listening. Right. You know. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you, sir. Okay, brother. Thanks for having me, man. All right. Take care. What's up, people? This is Pete Chatmon. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter via @PeteChatmon. Follow the pod on IG via @Let'sShootWithPeteChatmon, and hit up our mailbag with questions, suggestions, or hey, donations if you're feeling like it via let'sshootwithpetechatmon@gmail.com. And just in case you need to know how to spell it, that's Pete with the last name Chatmon. Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon is produced and edited by the multi-talented cut creator Tristan Nash. Assistant produced by the young mogul Jada George, and features the wonderfully gifted Kelly McCreary as our announcer. It's written by yours truly, but I mostly come up with these questions on the fly, which you've probably noticed. Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon is sponsored by Sweat Equity, so go ahead and get your podcast swag via PeteChatmon.com and leave a review on iTunes if so inclined. That shit matters. All right, y'all. That was episode 52 with Mr. Reggie Rock Bythewood. Thanks for listening to Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon. Next week, tune in as we welcome Mr. Garrett G. Mac McNamara, a big wave surfer, a director of his own right, and a cool-ass dude to talk to. In the meantime, stay safe, spread love, and keep creating.